Giants fans, what is going on? Welcome to the first episode of the third season of the New York Giants Rush Draft Show. So, unlike in the last couple years, though, this is a very important one because we're analyzing the quarterbacks. In 2022 and 2023, we didn't really find it very likely the Giants would get a quarterback. So, we did a quarterback episode anyway, but it wasn't as important. Now, completely different story. I tend to lean that the Giants are drafting a quarterback. They're certainly looking at quarterbacks, and there's a lot of quarterbacks to analyze. So we're going to start with 6 today. We're joined by our special guest, Chris the Entertainer. But as usual, we'll bring up the top guys that we thought were worth discussing, and we'll break down each one of them, and then talk about, what's looking like in terms of the Giants getting a quarterback. I mean, there are good odds that they do, or is there a chance they go for something else? How are they feeling in the building? We'll find out. But first and foremost, Truth, Season 3, man. What's going on?
Hey, Spartan, I'm psyched here. We got the topic of the year, the quarterbacks, and we got somebody who we have on Twitter that I admire a lot, the Entertainer, in his knowledge of the game. So this is gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And guys, let me just say something. I mean, Truth, the reason Truth is so awesome with this is because every player that he loves, like, he'll always give one dude that he's just absolutely in love with, and they always end up going to the Baltimore Ravens, which means that he's right about every high-level analysis that he's ever had. So, I mean, you had two in 2022, and they both made the Pro Bowl. I mean, anyway, it's good to have you back, Truth. It's good to run this with you, man.
This is my best time of year, favorite time of year right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And everybody loves breaking down the quarterbacks, whether we need one or not. So that makes this one even greater. I mean, we're just breaking down quarterbacks in general, and it's a lot of fun. But for our special guest, it is the Entertainer. Without further ado, Chris, what is going on, brother?
What's going on, man? Good to see you guys. I think I was on last. I forgot. Maybe we did a running backs show. I don't remember.
Yeah, we did.
Running backs, it was right. Yeah, but excited to be back. Unfortunately, like Mike said, in recent years, this has been my favorite time of year. Outside of last year when we were actually good, we've all been thinking about this since week 5 or week 6. If we're being honest, once we started to see the wheels unravel and our season went to hell, but. It should be a really interesting offseason. I think free agency will tell us a lot about where we're headed in terms of the draft, and I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout the show. But, yeah, I don't know if I'm one way or the other in terms of whether or not we're going quarterback. But like you said, Mike, both of you guys are Mike, Spartan Mike. Like you said, I think it's the first year really since Daniel Jones has been the quarterback where it's at least a realistic possibility that we could be taking an early quarterback. Because if you look over the history of his career, you weren't obviously taking a quarterback after his first year where he had a pretty successful rookie season. Yep. After that, you knew we were taking the tackle. After that, there were no quarterbacks worth taking. Fields was, but we traded back. And then in the following draft, it was a horrible quarterback draft class. And then last year, we were picking 25th. So this is really the first year, guys, where I'm in agreement where it's at least a realistic possibility that a quarterback could be on the menu for the Giants.
Yeah, it's an applicable situation. I will say, I mean, going over these quarterbacks when I'm watching the tape, I mean, the one thing that's different about this year's class compared to, years past is, how many of these guys do have really good abilities with certain features. Like, it's not 2 years ago when we were analyzing like Kenny Pickett in his class. I mean, there's such a difference in talent between a lot of those quarterbacks. This year it's completely different. I mean, we have a sense that Caleb Williams is going to go 1, but there's a very good chance that there's 6 guys that go in the first round.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards 4, maybe 5, but I think that there are probably the first 3 picks are going to be quarterbacks. I am not as high on Jayden Daniels as some may be. I still think he's definitely a first-round talent. I'm not in love with him being a top 3 pick personally, but that's where it looks like where it's trending. And everybody picking at the top of the draft is quarterback needy, and it's a rich quarterback class. So the most important position, you're going to draft towards the strength of the draft. Those teams need quarterbacks. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. So I think more so than the amount of quarterbacks that are going to go in the first round, it's where they're going to go. You're going to have the top 3 picks are probably going to be quarterbacks, which is crazy.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I think what I want to do is save the questions more about, how do the Giants have to think about this with pick 6? How, odds of trading up, odds of trading back. Let's save all that for after we go through quarterback by quarterback. But I just want to hit on high levels, the breakdowns of each quarterback and your thoughts. So why don't we start from the top? I will go with Caleb Williams. Right now, the odds on DraftKings is that, it's if you have $1, on a bet for Caleb Williams to go first, you get back a dime on top of your original $100. So he's probably going to be the first pick unless something crazy happens. And that's regardless of whether or not he goes to the Bears. That's not the call. They're saying that the Bears do trade back. Whoever's trading up is getting Caleb Williams. He's a top dog in the class. Chris, what are your thoughts on Caleb?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I not only do I think he's going first, I think he's going to the Bears. Like, I would be stunned if the Bears trade out of that pick, because you look at what Ryan Poles did last year, and it was obviously a really good trade. It ended up netting him the first overall pick in this draft. But if he passes up on a quarterback this year and Justin Fields doesn't work out, all of a sudden you got egg on your face. You passed up on CJ Stroud, and now you may have potentially passed up on the next top 5 quarterback in the league, which I think there's 2 guys in this draft who at least have a realistic chance of reaching that level, and this is the first one, and that's Caleb Williams. So I think he's going first. I think he's going to the Bears. I think Justin Fields will be playing elsewhere next year. Probably the Steelers, if I had to guess, just because they're picking more towards the tail end of the draft. They kind of need a quarterback. Makes sense for them. A team that's really a quarterback away from competing, I think they can make sense. There's probably a few other teams you could say. But to me, Caleb Williams, I started watching him 2 years ago when I never thought in a million years that I thought that he would even be in the discussion for a guy that the Giants could take. Not that I think he really is at this point anyway, but at one point he was, when we thought we were going to have a top 2 pick. Didn't end up that way. I just fell in love with him as a player. 2 years ago when I was watching USC late at night, anytime they'd be on TV, I would make sure to tune in. He is special. I don't buy in to this media narrative that people have brought up that they think he's soft, that they, all the stuff that you heard late in the season. You heard the same things about CJ Stroud last year. Not the same exact things, but people knocked him for his low IQ score or whatever it was on the test at the combine. How did that work out? Caleb Williams, when you watch him play, he's special. I mean, the guy, people compare him to Mahomes, and that's insane to say.
Yeah.
But his off-platform throws, his improv skills, his big play ability behind a really, really bad USC offensive line, I think he has elite potential. You never know. Ryan Leaf had elite potential. Didn't work out. But when I watch Caleb Williams, I say to myself, yeah, that guy has everything from a physical standpoint you could want in a quarterback.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, Truth, how are you feeling about Caleb Williams as a player?
Well, no, there's no doubt about that. His athletic ability and his football talents are off the charts. I just got a little bit. Look, I'm old school. I got a little bit taken when he got emotional. I know it's an emotional game, but when he went in the stands and kind of cried in his mom's arms, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into that too much. I think, and I hear other things. I don't know how true it is, but there's no perfect prospect here. Any of the quarterbacks we're going to talk about, I get it. But no, he is a talented player. So I'll just stick to the football field. He is everything Chris said. He is, and he will be a good NFL football player.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I mean, just watching, I don't know how defenses prepare to play against him. I mean, his ability to make plays outside of the pocket, maneuver in the pocket, I mean, it's second to none. And there's quarterbacks on here that are pretty good at that. Jayden Daniels is phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, Caleb Williams is tough to defend. And then, of course, you add in the fact that he's a good passer, too. I mean, he's a threat. And I think he can walk out on the field day one for anybody and doesn't need the rest time that I would argue that a couple of these quarterbacks might just want to sit behind, a veteran for a couple of weeks. I wouldn't even bother with him, unless there's an issue with the talent of the offensive line. But
no, he'll play day one.
Yeah. And let me say this. USC probably would have sucked this past year without him. Like, they really weren't all that talented of a team. Yeah. And he kind of dragged them to the amount of wins that they got to, right? Still not a great season. Washington had a much better season, but, Caleb overall is a good player. I have one very, very lazy, I'm not even going to call this analysis, just one little lazy thing that concerns me. I kind of felt this way when I watched Kyler Murray a little bit. Like, when I watched the game, it looks very similar. Chris, this is a little bit of a curveball, but do you think that there's anything Caleb Williams is doing better than Kyler that should kind of put aside that rest a little bit?
In terms of a prospect, do I like him more than I liked Kyler? I do. I think he's a much better prospect than Kyler was coming out. I do. I think he's got a bigger arm. I know people like Kyler Murray a lot coming out. Kyler's a better runner. I mean, Kyler was super athletic, but as an overall prospect, Yeah, I think Caleb, if we're just talking from a talent standpoint, and I get what Mike was saying, I think that has to be considered, especially from a New York Giants perspective, because the media is a big deal here. You have to be able to handle the pressures of New York. It's not the same thing if you play in Tennessee or most places in the NFL in comparison to New York. So I get that has to be evaluated. But from a pure talent standpoint, I think Caleb's one of the most complete quarterback prospects I've seen in the last 10 years. I mean, I think he's that good. Like Andrew Luck like level coming into the pros. I think he's that polished. Yeah, I think he's good.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is one weird comment. I mean, but towards, what the New York sports media gets especially harped on is things that Caleb Williams does, like, painting the nails. I mean, that's going to be like a frontline thing in the New York Post, crying in his mom's arm. Like, these are the kind of things that it's very old school, old, cigar smoking dudes. It's just a very it's a New York personality type with the media person. Now, granted, Chris, you are New York media personnel, so ease up on the guy, will you?
No, I listen. I would love it if we got. He ain't coming here though.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be in Chicago, but
yeah,
I get it. I get why people might be scared off a little bit based off that stuff, but I think the talent is just too high for that. Like, to me, his quote unquote potential character concerns, they pale in comparison to a guy like Kadarius Toney. And the crying in his mom's arms, for me, the way I took that was it was an emotional moment. It is what it is. He let his emotions out. I'm not going to read too much into that.
Yeah. I'm indifferent. I do understand the concern, though. Truth. One last question: does his height matter? Are you concerned at all that he's a little short?
I think height does matter at the quarterback position at a certain point. It's why I didn't like Bryce Young too much last year. It's why I didn't like Kyler Murray when he was coming out. But Caleb's like a legitimate probably 6'1.5". Is it perfect? Is it what Drake Maye is, which we're going to, I'm sure, talk about next? No.
Yeah,
like, if you had a cookie cutter, you would say, give me that 6'4.5", super mobile, huge arm. Yeah, that's ideal. But in today's NFL, man, I've seen so many quarterbacks, especially when you have the abilities that Caleb does to extend plays, use his legs, big playability with his arm. I think his height's not a concern for me.
Okay.
Yeah. How tall is Patrick Mahomes? How tall is Mahomes?
6'2"? He's not. Yeah, maybe 6'3". 6'2" or 6'3".
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 6'2".
Yeah.
Okay.
Eli was listed 6'5", but when I met him over the summer, I randomly met him at a steakhouse here in Chicago. It was kind of crazy, but he didn't look 6'5". He looked like he was 6'3". He's about the same height as I am, 6'3". So
you're a tall dude. I met you at the Giants game. I remember.
I know. I didn't realize it was you because I had only dealt with you on Twitter. That was before we ever met doing this. But yeah, I remember that with Penix. Yep.
You're a tall dude, Spartan.
Yeah. But yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so he's off the list for the Giants, but it was at least worth discussing. And of course, I mean, the crazy off chance that would pay trillions on DraftKings if you bet for the Giants to trade up and get him as at least worth considering in a QB need a year. But the next quarterback, now we're starting to get into the more likely target options for the Giants. What are your thoughts on Drake Maye of North Carolina?
Dude, I'm going to be honest. I didn't watch him nearly as much as I watched Caleb coming into this year. I don't watch a lot of North Carolina games.
They're not on TV very often. And like I said, the year before, I'd be up at 10 o'clock and I'd be like, oh, Caleb's on again. Let me watch. I watch like all their games. This year, I made it a point, especially when I saw that we were going to be more than likely picking at what I felt the time, top 2, before we won 3 straight with DeVito, to really look at Drake Maye and watch his games. I think I watched 3 or 4 North Carolina games in their entirety. Drake Maye, like I just said, if you cooked up a quarterback in a lab in terms of physical traits, that's who you want. I mean, you watch him play. I think you hear it all the time, but I think it holds true in terms of just his style of play, who I would compare him to as a quarterback. He's kind of like a cross between Justin Herbert and Josh Allen. Like, this guy is 6'4", he's 230, I think it is, and he's probably going to pack on even more muscle. He runs like Josh Allen, like he puts his body on the line, he runs guys over. Some of the throws the guy's able to make, I'm not going to quite put his arm talent on the level of a Josh Allen, because I remember when I watched Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming,
I was just in awe. Now, I didn't know if I wanted to draft him because he was such an unknown, but just in terms of his raw abilities, I was in awe of that dude's arm strength and some of the things that he was able to do. I've always been a big fan of his, but I do see the comparisons. I don't think he has quite that level of arm strength, but it's close enough where I could say Drake Maye, yeah, I see why people feel this guy could be a top 5 quarterback in the league. And if you're taking a quarterback that early, you better feel that way about them. And if I'm being honest, and I know we're going to continue to talk about the other quarterback prospects, that's where it ends for me in terms of quarterbacks in this draft that I feel could be top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. It's the first 2 guys we discussed.
Okay. All right. Wow. I mean, I get what you're saying. With the quarterback we're going to discuss next is Jayden Daniels, and we'll get to him. I feel like he has the upside to possibly be that guy, but I know what you're saying, like based on purely what we're seeing and what we have already
listen,
seen.
I'm probably not.
I agree.
I'm in the minority on that. A lot of people are, and I like Jayden Daniels. I think he'd be very good, but I don't think he possesses the equal ceiling of these first 2 guys.
Truth, what are your thoughts on Drake Maye?
Well, I'm kind of in agreement with Chris. I think this kid's going to be a day 1 starter as a rookie. And again, he has the size, the intangibles. He likes to throw on the run. I noticed that I did watch a few of the games when they did have him here. I'm in the Carolinas where I live. So I did watch a few of the games. And, sometimes he throws deliberately off 1 foot. Like he doesn't have time, like he doesn't set himself to throw the ball. And again, every quarterback here is not perfect. We know that. But I hope that gets fixed because in the NFL, it's a faster game and some of those throws will be intercepted because I think he does, rush those throws where he should take his time and throw it, set his feet. But, he's everything he says. He can run. He can throw the ball. It doesn't have a Josh Allen arm, like you said. He doesn't. But he'll definitely be, especially where we don't know he's going to be going in second pick. He's going to be playing as a rookie. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm not thrilled where he's going because Washington they got some talent over there on the offensive side of the ball. Their offensive line's not very good, but he's going to have some pieces, and he may not have a Josh Allen arm, but it's very close. He's got a big arm, this kid, and I'm a fan. I'm not going to be a fan of him once he's probably playing for Washington, though.
Well, quick question, we don't want to sweat, but you think going to Washington, having Eric Bieniemy being the offensive coordinator, and he did have Mahomes, you think that would be something that would benefit him?
Yeah, listen, I think Bieniemy, I'm surprised, and I always understood why Bieniemy wasn't getting head coaching opportunities because he never called the plays in Kansas City. Not to mention he had that thing on his record, whatever it was. I think he had a DWI. I can't remember, but
he smoked a little pot in 1997.
Is that what it was? I don't even know. But
I don't even, something along those lines.
But this past year, what I saw Bieniemy do, at least early on in the year with Washington, he was making Sam Howell look like a pretty good quarterback. So you couple a guy with Drake Maye's talent. And the other funny thing is Drake Maye went to the same school as Sam Howell. So I think they're going to dip in the same talent pool. A little bit of familiarity there between those two. You figure Sam Howell will still be on the roster. So that'll be a good way to enter the NFL, being with a guy that because you got to figure Howell will still be on the roster. So I'm a fan. I'm not happy that Washington's going to end up with him, but I think he's really good. I wouldn't be stunned at all if Drake Maye's the best quarterback in this class. And that's coming from a guy that loves Caleb Williams. I actually think Drake Maye's ceiling might be higher, which is wild. Like, I think his ceiling is sky high.
No, absolutely. But I can totally see it. And you're right. I mean, it's tough to find anything about this guy that's not to like. The only thing that does come up is truth. Like you said, every now and then there's some boneheaded decisions. And then the only other thing that might be a little bit major because we just dealt with it in New York. Now, granted, the offensive line's been atrocious, but sack avoidance. They haven't been too good with it. He's not particularly good at that in North Carolina. So those are generally the only knocks. But again, the arm, the delivery, the reads, and that's what's critical after dealing with Jones. And I'm sorry, I don't want to bash on him too much, but it is a frustrating point with the reads. That's one of the things that Drake Maye is really good at, right? He's finding all these different options.
And he's a guy that let's say Washington likes Jayden Daniels, which I don't think is out of the question.
Sure.
He's a guy that if you had the opportunity to trade up for, to 3, which I don't think you would. I think New England would just snatch it. But if you did, I think Joe Schoen would have to do what he had to do. You have to go up and get that. He has that kind of ceiling that I think you have to take a swing for a prospect like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the next guy on the list is, I mean, we already mentioned we're about to talk about him, but Jayden Daniels. Truth, I'd love to get your thoughts on him. We're talking about a guy that everybody talks about, has a high ceiling and whatnot, but maybe it's kind of like more to the game that people wish they saw. So what are your thoughts on the dude?
Well, I like him. I do like him. And I remember months ago when he was being rejected second round, I was telling people his draft stock is going to rise, man. Every game he plays, you're seeing something in him that's kind of reminds you of Lamar Jackson,
Yeah.
and he, and I still think, he's going to turn heads at the combine. I think he's going to blow people away. I understand what Chris is saying about him. I don't think he'd be a guy that should come in and start on day one as a rookie. Here's a kid that would benefit a good year of development under a team that has a quarterback, and just let him develop on a good pace so he can ease his way into the NFL speed. But I like the kid. I think he's going to get a little bigger. I know he's got a leaner frame, but I think he put a little more size on that frame, and I heard his speed.
Yeah, and then Chris, for you, I mean, what are your thoughts on?
I actually said the same thing that Mike did when I saw him going second round in mock drafts. I laughed. People were saying, I remember 6 weeks ago, like maybe 2 games to go in the season when I would be doing my live streams, people would be like, Chris, what do you think about the idea of taking Neighbors in the first round and pairing him with Jayden Daniels in the second? I'm like, he ain't getting to the second round. The guy is absolutely going to be an early first round pick. He's kind of like, they're not comparable in the sense because Anthony Richardson didn't have really good collegiate numbers. He wasn't very successful at the collegiate level, but he rose as the process went along. And I said the same thing about Jayden Daniels. I said he's going to rise. His physical skills, his physical tools are just too high, and there's too many quarterback needy teams. And I agree. I think the combine's only going to help him more. I think he'll probably run a good 40 time. And the NFL has changed. A guy like Lamar Jackson 6 years ago didn't go as high as he would go today because the league has changed. We've become more leaning towards guys that could do it both with their legs and their arms. The things that worries me about Jayden Daniels in comparison to the other 2 prospects, and I know he's young, and I know he's a prospect, and I know he could put on weight, his frame worries me, but you could say the same thing about Lamar Jackson, and he's had a long career in the NFL, and he's probably going to win his second MVP. Jayden Daniels certainly is capable of being a great quarterback in the NFL. I'm just much less sure about him than the other 2 quarterbacks. And it's just a matter of preference. For me,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, for me, I want a quarterback that can absolutely run, that is capable of running, but doesn't need to run to be successful. I feel Jayden Daniels is more in line with a guy that almost has to use his legs. It has to be a part of his arsenal week in and week out for him to be an elite quarterback, kind of like Lamar Jackson. That's just my preference. I would prefer more of a quarterback like a Josh Allen or a Justin Herbert or a Pat Mahomes that is capable of running, but doesn't have to. And so that's just my preference. It's why I'm not as high on Jayden Daniels as some other people. But I certainly see why people like the kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did have an impressive season because he wasn't really talked about that high early on at the start. And he kind of made his way to be that dude more and more throughout the season. I think, and the knocks that he has, I mean, one of the serious ones is, wobbly and slow ball delivery. I actually think his throwing is very similar to Eli Manning. Eli Manning in the intermediate to, moderately deep pass game was excellent. He was very, very good. The throws were soft, though, and I don't know if you remember the 2010 season when Eli had 25 interceptions. 7 of them were tipped. 7 of them were tipped balls because, and what the wide receivers quoted was that the ball delivery was a little bit slower than they're used to. And I don't know. I mean, that could be an issue, but, accuracy is, not as great as somebody like, Maye or Williams. And so those are legitimate concerns. And like you said, I mean, in terms of the running quarterback, I think starting with Russell Wilson, it became pretty imperative that, yes, you need a guy who's pass first and they're going to ball out in the pass game. But, if it's 3rd and 4, you got to have a dude that can run to the sticks to get first down if there's no other options, right? And so that's kind of thing with Jayden Daniels. I mean, the pass game is very good. It's not perfected, though, like some of these other quarterbacks are. And so that's where these teams have to assess, what are they going to do? Because that's a developmental piece, and that's a little bit harder. Like if you told me one of the weaknesses he has is, he's got to be careful when he runs. He runs too high. He doesn't dive enough. He's taking hits. That's workable. That's an easy thing. But like the ball delivery at this point in time in a quarterback's career, that is something that is a little bit of upwork. But he's phenomenally talented. He keeps plays alive very well, almost as good as Caleb Williams. He is a very impressive quarterback. He's going to avoid sacks. I feel more comfortable with him behind the offensive line than somebody like, JJ McCarthy. And we'll get to him in a minute too. But yeah, no, I mean, I completely get where you're coming from here. I do think a quarterback or a team is going to look at him and fall in love, though, which might trigger him.
I think he's going top three. I think he's going top three.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can just add, like what Chris mentioned earlier, if he does go to New England, they're gonna rush him. They're gonna get him to play and start, and maybe he can't handle that. I don't know. I tend to think he needs time, and that could hurt him. Like coming out there, like it definitely hurt Bryce Young. It hurt him playing this year. It really did with a team that didn't have talent around him. Right, the kid had a hard time. So, I just hope they do the right thing in New England. They draft him, maybe get a veteran in there. Don't rush the kid and let him develop, and then bring him in mid-season and let him feel his way. That's what I hope.
Yeah. This is going to be just a slightly controversial opinion. A lot of people don't agree with me. I mean, I tend to prefer when a quarterback sits for a good amount of time. I mean, you look back, and granted, a lot of these quarterbacks also went to good situations. Don't get me wrong, like a guy like Mahomes is super talented, but I do think, when you're 22 years old and you're getting drafted and then having to be, the cameras in your face 24/7 for the newspaper, and you're going out there week one, I feel like you have butterflies in your stomach more so than if you sat the bench for a full year and you're kind of getting sick of it and you're foaming at the mouth a little bit more when you're 23 years old going into that next season. Like I do think that mindset does help, because if you kind of have like a so-and-so first season now, people are on your case very quickly. And this is New York. Like we said, it's going to be like that.
I couldn't agree more. And I said it, and it was an unpopular opinion when I said it on my YouTube channel. And I even said it after he had a really good debut game. I thought it was a mistake for the New York Giants to put Daniel Jones in there after just 2 games in his rookie season. You had Eli Manning on the roster that you were paying a lot of money. You had every excuse in the book to sit Daniel Jones for at least half the season, let him sit, and let him slowly be integrated into the starting lineup.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been the more appropriate, smarter approach. I'm in complete agreement. Now, not all situations are created equal. The Jordan Love situation was perfect. Like, you couldn't have done it better. You draft a guy that you feel is a developmental player. You get him late in the first round. Obviously, the initial plan was probably to move off of Rodgers the next year. They didn't expect him to go out there and win the MVP when it looked like he was starting to decline a little bit. But it was a perfect situation for Jordan Love. You sit and learn for 3 years, and then you come in completely ready to go, and the team doesn't miss a beat.
Yeah. And again, he's 25 years old now. Now he's like, all right, I am sick of being on the bench. Like, I can't wait to it's not any of these players don't want to play, but it's 5 months between getting drafted and in JJ McCarthy's. I mean, the kid just turned 21. It's a different mindset.
Yeah, he's the youngest among everybody.
Yeah,
we'll talk about.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I don't think 3 years is realistic in most cases in today's NFL, especially with the way that the salary cap works. It was different back in the 80s. Now you got to, especially if you take a guy early in the first round, you got to get him out there probably at some point in his rookie year.
He's got to get some snaps. He's got to get
some snaps. But if you get a guy mid to late first, I think they can sit a year in the right circumstance. And I think Pat Mahomes is a perfect example of that when you have a team, and the Giants actually could be an example of that.
Giants, and I will say this too about the Giants. If the Giants wanted to draft a quarterback, I think everybody gets an extra year in terms of Shane and Dable. If they're putting Daniel Jones in to let the next quarterback sit for a little bit, I think that gives them an automatic pass, in my opinion. I don't know. I mean, unless things would have to go haywire otherwise.
Yeah. but I could see it. I could foresee a scenario, and we'll talk about it with McCarthy, because I think that's a guy that I could foresee that scenario, that if the Giants were to trade up to the back end of the first or take a quarterback early day 2, where Daniel Jones starts the entire year or starts up until near the end of the year, and maybe make a change near the end of the year. Obviously, the team would have to be doing okay at least. You couldn't completely bomb, because eventually the pressures would be to sit Jones. But I do think they're in a ideal situation if they wanted to go that route, where they could say, listen, Jones is good enough where we could get by and have a somewhat competitive team, and we could if we could stay healthy and Andrew Thomas doesn't get hurt and Saquon Barkley doesn't get hurt, and we could remain somewhat competitive, and we could integrate the rookie into the starting lineup either really late in his rookie year or year 2. So it could be a good situation for a developmental quarterback with the New York Giants.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like the same way they did with Eli when they had Kurt Warner there.
Yeah.
Didn't they do that with Kurt Warner?
They did it for about half a year. I think it was 7 games Warner played.
Yep. So, all right. Well, on to the next guy. Now we're talking about the oldest of the quarterbacks, but I got a lot to say about him. But Chris, I want to hear your thoughts on Michael Penix Jr.
There's things I like and there's things I don't. He's a somewhat polarizing. The guy Bad Dog, who I do a show with, loves Penix. He's loved Penix for 2 years. He's like his favorite quarterback outside of Caleb, probably, in this draft class. I'm not nearly as high on him as Bad Dog is. The thing that jumps out to me with Penix is, whenever I watch Washington games, is he does have a lot of zip on his throws, and they always talk about that whenever you watch a Washington game. The snap of his wrist, it generates a lot of torque on the ball. You see, the spiral, I think, is like one of the fastest spirals in college, whatever they say everywhere, but you could see it. He could throw it from hash to hash as fast as anybody at the collegiate level. That stands out to me. The thing that I worry about with Penix, one, his injury history, and some people downplay that. I think the guy had 4 season-ending injuries while at college. Granted, a lot of that happened early on in his career while at Indiana. The other thing that I question is, this guy is an older prospect, and I'm not a guy that poo-poos that. Joe Burrow was an older prospect. You saw him come in, and he's one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the sport. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't draft the guy because of that, but you at least have to question, does he look a lot better at the collegiate level because he's playing 19-year-olds, and this guy's been playing college ball for 6 years.
Right.
So that's always in the back of your head. And he's capable of running, but he's not the athlete of a lot of these other quarterbacks we're going to talk about. J.J. McCarthy included in that. Bo Nix included in that. Penix is a guy that if you don't have a good offensive line, he could be in trouble. And he's a lefty, so I like him, but I view Penix more as a day 2 guy. I don't like him in the first round.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Truth. What do you got to say about him before you know how I feel about him, Truth? You go ahead.
Know. Go ahead. Well, I'll be brief because I know how you feel about him. I see where Chris is going and everything. And another thing I noticed with him is his arm slot. He likes to, if you remember Ken Stabler, he kind of like throws like right about, where's my thing? Right about here. And he kind of like slings it. And that could be a problem in the NFL because, you got some big linemen coming in. But maybe an OC will say, I'm not going to change that because it works for him. But I noticed that he kind of slings it, not get over the top. So other than that, everything that Chris said, I agree. I think the injuries are a big issue. And that's why he's going later in the round, in the draft, because of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, here are my thoughts. And I've actually had the pleasure of seeing him play. I mean, the unpleasurable thing was that it was against Michigan State. And I mean, because he was at Indiana, he's been torching us for 5 years. It's unbelievable. But what I like about him, when I watched him play, and he was under pressure, his receivers were well covered. I actually think he's the most accurate of all the quarterbacks. I think his arm strength and his arm delivery is the best. I actually think he is. But what happened, the story is with those injuries, I mean, you're absolutely right. They are horrendous. And, I say this, I mean, they might not even ask him to throw balls at the combine. They might just send a medical staff, and it's going to be like an alien spaceship with the dude. He's just going to be, poked in the leg, poked in the knee, walk. That's really what I expect here, because what they have to determine is, are the injuries that he's sustained going to impact his career moving forward? And if the answer is yes, he's going to plummet. If the answer is no, or anybody finds the answer to be no, then his draft stock is really in that first round there. But to your point, Chris, when he was at Indiana, he used to be athletic. He used to be mobile before
he got
he was. Injuries. And that's the damn shame of it. I mean, I really thought he would have been the best prospect if it wasn't for those injuries, because he used to be able to run up the field. I mean, he got Indiana, and we've had Micah McFadden on the show to talk about it. He got Indiana from generally they're a doormat of the conference, like 3-9. They almost won the Big Ten in 2020. They went 8-2, and they at least are not 8-2. It would have been whatever the COVID trunk year was. They lost one game to Ohio State. That was it. And even that, they almost won. They beat Michigan. They beat Penn State. They beat Wisconsin. They took care of all those generally top teams. And seeing him elevate that team to do that was incredible. But again, the injuries, I mean, they're really backlogging the dude. And I'm very curious to see what happens here. He's got the widest bell curve, in my opinion, of going high and going low. I think this is it, because it depends on the injuries here.
Yeah. I'm going to stand with my evaluation in terms of where I think he's going to go in the draft. But hey, crazy things happen. I view him as a early to mid second round quarterback. That's my range for him. That's where I think he goes because of some of the things I talked about. But maybe a team, all it takes is one team to fall in love with a guy, and it certainly could happen. I didn't think Daniel Jones would go where he went. I didn't think Mac Jones would even go where he went. I didn't love him. I didn't like Mac Jones. I think Penix is a good quarterback. I just don't see. I don't like his ceiling enough to view him as a mid or even late first round pick. I don't like his ceiling enough. I think he could be a good quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he could be a great one.
So let me ask you this: what would your thoughts be if the Giants did get a wide receiver first and then got Michael Penix in the second round? I mean, what are your thoughts on a scenario of that nature?
Yeah, I'm completely open to that. If you draft the neighbors and you take a Penix early day 2, I think Penix is a guy that you could sit behind Daniel Jones. And there's no, like, if Penix doesn't work out, who cares? You're not paying him anything if he's a second round pick. So that doesn't prohibit you from drafting a quarterback in the next draft if you wanted to. Like,
exactly. Like, there's no pressure there, right? Because let's face it, the Giants will blow a second round pick here and there. I mean, they do it almost every year anyway. So,
yeah, it's not ideal for me. I'd rather, because we have so many holes. Right. I'd rather use those picks on other positions if you're not going to take a quarterback at 6. But if you take Penix in the second round, sometimes it works. It worked for the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. So
yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't be upset with that.
For sure. All right, now let's get on to let's go on to JJ McCarthy then. I mean, what are your thoughts on the national championship winning quarterback? You like him?
I like him. Yeah, I haven't shied away from that. I've said that now for months. He's probably the most polarizing quarterback in this class because I feel like there's people that either really like him or they really don't. And I get the knocks that people have against him because he is tough to evaluate because you look at the offense he plays in, it's not stat friendly. It's not college friendly. It's not like Oregon, who we'll talk about with Bo Nix, with all these screen passes. It's not like Washington, where it's a hurry-up offense and there's a lot of throws involved. This is a team that relied on the strength of their team, which was their offensive line, their defense, and their ground game. So he didn't really play in a situation where he could flourish like a Jayden Daniels, for example, with LSU, where he could put up those Heisman numbers. But when I look at J.J. McCarthy, the things I like about him, and I'm not taking him at 6, by the way. Let's get that talk out of the way.
Yeah.
I've seen some people start to play with that, and I have seen him move up in mocks. I do think he's going to be in the first half of the first round. That's my bold take of this draft. I think he's going to have a very impressive combine, but I would not take him at 6. If you were to trickle down to the back end of the first, I would like the Giants to consider moving up to grab him at pick 26, 27, 28, in that range if he were ever to fall. But the traits to me pop out. When I watch McCarthy, first off, he was a very highly thought of prospect coming out of high school. I think he was a 5-star recruit, if I'm not mistaken. He was one of the highest quarterbacks in his high school class. And when you watch him play, the thing that really stands out to me with McCarthy, the velocity of the ball coming out of his hand, it just explodes out of his hand. You see natural arm strength, in my opinion. And I think his athletic ability is very understated. I think he is a very good runner, like comparable probably to a Daniel Jones in terms of his ability to be successful as a runner at the NFL level. But I get it. I get what people say. They didn't ask him to do much, and I get it. They run the ball a whole hell of a lot, but I like his traits. And I do think, as talked about earlier by Mike, he's the youngest quarterback in this class. I don't know if he's quite hit his ceiling yet. You think about a guy like Penix, who we just talked about. He's 3 years older than this dude. McCarthy never really got that opportunity to flourish in a pass-heavy offense where you really got to see him take advantage of his God-given ability, because I do think his tools are first-round tools, and I do think teams are going to see him at the combine, and he's going to go a lot earlier than people think.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Truth? What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I often say that sometimes stats are misleading and we shouldn't get caught up on stats. And JJ is a perfect example because of Chris said. He was never asked to do a lot in terms of carrying that team, throwing 40 times a game. They had a great defensive team. They had a good running attack, but when you watch the games against Alabama, against Ohio State, when he had to make throws, he made throws.
He did. That last drive against Alabama was very impressive.
I know. Yeah. And he could throw the football. And again, he's 21 years old. He has such great poise for a young guy, when the game's on the line. And that's what I look at. I watch these guys. What do they do when they gotta move the ball when they're trailing? And he was trailing in those games, and he moved the ball and he scored. So to me, I think he's a leader. And I know one thing, Joe Schoen loves leaders. He loves guys who have that characteristic about them. And to me, he would fit a New York Giant, what Schoen wants in a New York Giant quarterback. I think he would fit that mold.
Yeah. And we kind of talked about it earlier before the show. I think he is the perfect situation for a Jordan Love-like situation for the New York Giants.
Yep.
If he gets to that 23, 24, 25 range, I think if you're Shane, if you like him, he's a perfect guy that you could say, he's 21, he's a baby. We could couple our 2 second-round picks, or maybe trade one of the seconds and a third or a fourth, and whatever it may be, to go up and grab this guy. Let him sit for a year. Let him learn with Daniel Jones starting at the quarterback. Maybe we sign a good vet. Who knows? And I think that's an ideal situation. I just don't think, and I could be completely wrong, I don't think he's going to get there. Like I said, I think he's going top 15. I think teams are going to like this kid.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see it. I mean, look, there was debate as to whether or not he was going to go back to college. He must have gotten some sense that he was going to get picked because he came out into the draft, right?
Pick high in the first round. I think that was the thing, like Chris just said. I think he got wind through his agent, through other people that they respect, that he's going to go in the top first of the round, top half of the first round. That's what
right. And remember, this is a different era of college football. If you're a second round or third round guy and you're still young, it's better to go back to college because you can still make a lot of money through the NIL. So this is, completely different. Right. So my thoughts are this. I do find it a little challenging because I wish that he was the center focus of Michigan's offense, and we can sit here and say like his play, was really what kind of drove Michigan to the national championship. I'm not completely knocking it, but he's going to go from, if he went to the Giants, and hopefully they fix these things. He played behind probably one of the best offensive lines ever assembled in college football.
It was the best. If it wasn't the best in the country last year, it was top 2 or 3. It was elite offensive line, no doubt about it.
It was unbelievable. And I mean, imagine him going from that to the Giants, who had one of the worst sack numbers in NFL history last year, right? I worry about how he does under pressure because he wasn't really tested to be under pressure. And I want a quarterback. Again, he could be the guy, and I'm with you guys. If he gets drafted, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to be the ones that is bitching on Twitter because I wasn't the biggest fan. I do want a quarterback that has experience being the center focus of the offense, because I think that's just where the NFL has gone. He had good, really good running game there at Michigan, and in a game like Penn State, I mean, they ran the ball almost every play, and he didn't really get battle tested like that. But when he does throw the ball, he does throw it kind of on the money. And I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't elevate Michigan. It's not like the Georgia quarterbacks the last couple of years. He really has, done very well in the situations they need him to.
Listen, what did he go? 24-1 as a starter, I think it was. He beat Ohio State every time he played him. Jim Harbaugh, who I have a crush on,
He's
on
so
Jim
good.
Harbaugh.
He's so good.
I've always loved Jim Harbaugh, and Jim Harbaugh has come out and said he's a generational quarterback, and he gets to see him firsthand in the building. And granted, he's going to talk his guys up. I get that, but listen, I'm a fan. I don't want him at 6. I wouldn't scream if we did it. I'm a fan. I like JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I mean, look, they replaced an already established quarterback that helped them win the Big Ten and go to the playoffs in 2021. They replaced him the year after with JJ McCarthy, right? So that's how they felt about the dude. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that one. You know, I mean, I could. We're starting to get the territory. I could definitely see the Giants going for him.
I think he's the most interesting quarterback in this class because it is very polarizing. You have people that think I see people all the time. They say this dude's not even shouldn't be drafted in the first 3 rounds. I see it on Twitter all the time. And then you have people who think more like me that are like, there's no way this guy gets out of the first 20 picks. Like his talent. So it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes. I'm actually really excited to see where he goes.
Yeah.
Real quick, we haven't really brought too many comments up tonight. I mean, everybody, Darius. Yeah, we're Darius. Start with you, man. Thank you for coming in. You've been here since the start. Real cold G. What is going on, Mark? Yeah, I might bitch. We'll see what happens. We'll see how I'm feeling. Every now and then I have a bad day, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna bash Daniel Jones today for no reason. Just wreak havoc on Twitter. Probably not the best move, but anyway, let's wrap the quarterback talk up with just one more dude. How about Bo Nix out of Oregon? What are your thoughts here?
I do feel like at this point it's like overkill. Like I feel like there's people who just really don't like this guy, and any opportunity they get to slam him, they do it. At least that's the sense I get. I've never been in love with Bo Nix. Like he's a clear day 2 guy to me. Out of all the quarterbacks we talked about tonight, for me, I think there's 2 day 2 guys, and that's Penix and that's Nix. I don't view either one of them for me as a first round prospect. I think Nix is a guy that benefited greatly from the system that he ran. He wasn't very good while he played at Auburn. He goes to Oregon. He plays in a stat-friendly offense where there's a lot of yak, a lot of screen passes.
Yep.
He's got good athletic ability. He's actually a much better runner than people give him credit for, and he has the ability to make plays with his legs, extend plays. I don't think he's completely void of talent. I actually like him better as a prospect than I like Mac Jones coming out of Alabama, and Mac Jones went in the first round. So
he's more athletic than a guy like Mac Jones.
Yeah, much more athletic. I don't hate Bo Nix, but he's not a guy that I'd be excited about if we drafted. Even in the second round, if we took him, I'd be like, he's gonna probably be a backup or a guy that could start for a few years, but he's not gonna ever be a franchise quarterback. That's how I view Bo Nix. A guy like McCarthy, I get excited about because I say I could see the potential. Like this guy could be
younger,
and he's got traits and he's got tools, and I say this guy could, if all goes well, be a very good starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't feel that way about Bo Nix. I feel like he kind of is what he is for me. He's a fringe starter. That's how I view him in the NFL. I think he's probably a great backup to a mediocre starter in the NFL. That's where I view him. That's why I'm as a day 2 prospect.
He's going to win a Super Bowl, but as a backup. He seems like he's going to be one of those guys. Truth, what are your thoughts?
Well, like I just pointed out when I talked about JJ, like sometimes you don't look at stats. Here's a guy that maybe got punished because of the offensive system they put him in. You mentioned, Chris, that a lot of screens and stuff. Perhaps this kid, at the combine shows off his arm a little bit on those longer out routes and bombs, those long passes that maybe he may convince people that he's better. He can throw a vertical pass. I don't see him as a franchise quarterback, but I think he could end up with a career that people are going to be surprised and think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he'll be a suitable starter in the NFL.
I can see that for sure. I definitely think he'll be a starter in the NFL. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think he'll be a starter. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I think we'll look back and say that he did better than we thought he did. Bo Nix. Like you said, he really gets ripped apart on Twitter.
It's hilarious
how the guy fans don't like this kid.
I think it's overkill at this point. I've not been a fan of his. I thought at one point people were overhyping him. Now I think it's overkill. Like people are looking for any little thing to pick this guy apart. He's not a joke. He's not trash. He's a pretty good quarterback prospect. I just don't think he warrants being taken in the first round. And he's not a guy that would inspire excitement for me or most people in this fan base if we were to draft him. But he could be a solid quarterback. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. So what if he goes in the Giants' second pick in the second round?
I wouldn't scream if we took him with the first pick in the second round. If you like him and you think he could be a solid quarterback, it's a second round pick. You're paying the guy like $1 million, $2 million a year. You could easily move off, and if he turns into something great, you have a quarterback on a very cost-effective salary. So I wouldn't. If they like to go Penix in the second round, I'm completely fine with that. I'm not going to scream about that.
Yeah, because I could see this. The draft always gives you surprises. Day one, day two, always. And I could see a lot of offensive tackles being taken, a lot of wide receivers being taken within the first 50 picks. So this guy can definitely fall past 50 and
it happens every draft, man. Every draft, there's at least one or two quarterbacks that you're like Malik Willis, for example. Good
God. I mean, people were talking about him going top 10, the fans, the casuals, if you will. And
he ended up going, late third round?
He went way deep.
Geno Smith went second round in a year where most people thought he'd be a top 5 pick that year.
That's right.
It had Aaron Rodgers. Most thought could have been the first pick in that draft. Some people were saying pre-draft. He dropped to the back end of the first. So every draft, there's always one or two quarterbacks that go a lot later than people think. And I think that guy will probably be Bo Nix. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the third round, if I'm being honest. But all it takes is one team to like the guy. And if the Giants round 2, who am I to say? They got a lot more resources than any of us do. They get to interview these guys. They get to see them firsthand. I just don't see the elite traits. And if I'm taking a quarterback in the first round at any point in the first round, I at least want to feel he could be a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. And I don't feel that way with Bo Nix unless he has a Super Bowl caliber roster around him.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And the issue, my issues with the dude is, and don't get me wrong, I like that he's athletic. He does have some good balls here and there, but didn't like that. I did not like that offense he played in Oregon. Like you guys said, the stats overinflate how good he is. He struggles to find the ability to make plays on his feet when things are going wrong. I mean, he can't do that in the slightest. And he crumbles under pressure. And mind you, a lot of the big stats he's getting are from the big screen passes or whatever. Right, it's part of Oregon's playbook, and it's like, all right, if we get 60 yards off one of those guys, he didn't really get 60 yards. So, but anyway, look, that wraps up the 6 guys we want to talk about. But let's just talk about the Giants and how they relate to drafting a quarterback in general. And we've already touched on this a bit, Chris. But what do you feel like the odds are the Giants do get a quarterback? I mean, in the first round, are you putting it at 60?
When you say in the first round, do you mean at 6? Or are we combining the idea of that we could trade up to 27?
Let's start with pick 6. If they stay at pick 6, what are the odds?
5%.
5%. You don't think they're getting a quarterback if they stay up?
If not at pick 6, if we're getting a quarterback, I think it's going to be in the top 3. I think we're going to have to trade up. I don't think Shane stays at 6 and just hopes that his quarterback gets to him. So I'm not going to completely rule it out. That's why I said 5%. I would have said Daniel Jones was 5% to go 6 if you would ask me 2 or 3 weeks before that draft. Well, the 5% hit, so it could happen. But if you were asking me what do I think the likelihood we're going to take a quarterback at 6 without trading up, which I don't think we're going to be able to do, it's under 10% for me. I don't think we'll take a quarterback at 6.
I got you. So you're really thinking that it's either trade up or trade down, and that kind of indicates obviously if they trade up, they're getting a quarterback. I mean, I'd be dumbfounded if they traded up and got Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think that's happening. But, if they're trading up to 3, they're probably getting a quarterback.
They're going quarterback.
You're also saying if they trade back, there's also a very high chance they're getting a quarterback, right? It's almost like if they stay at 6, it's the least likely case they get a quarterback almost.
Yeah, for me, the most likely scenarios of them getting a quarterback are either trading up into the top 3 or trading up into the back end of the first round. I
got you. Okay.
I think those are the most likely scenarios where we get a quarterback.
Okay, all right, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think at 6, you got to look. Consider best player available. There's going to be a lot of talent there at 6 of available prospects that aren't quarterbacks that are BPAs, right?
Yeah.
Wide receivers, Neighbors, and Odunez. Their talent, and Brock Bowers. I don't think they'll take her.
It's possible. It's possible they could.
I don't know. I have a funny feeling.
I don't want them
might
to
take him.
I agree. I think he will go to the Chargers at 5. I agree.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, if he is as good as Kelsey or Gronk, go for it. Because listen, you have a very good tight end. I actually love that, but I mean like elite. Like it's got to be best of the best. Mark Andrews won't cut it. That's my personal take there.
Yeah, I don't want him. I don't want him where we're picking, but it's possible. He's that highly thought of. He could be our pick.
Yeah. So the best scenario, I think Chris is right, is them trading back into the first round. They have 2 picks in the second round, and they have a picks for next year's draft. They can put together something and move up back in if a quarterback is falling, right? If he's dropping for some reason, like a JJ, let's just say he's dropping for some God known reason. That's a big part. That's plus
the added value with that, and it's exactly what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. They traded up from the second round to the back end of the first. The extra added value with that is you get the 5th-year option because he's a first-round pick. Rather than waiting till 37, if you give a day 3 pick or 2 day 3 picks to move up from 37 to say 27, you get that extra 5th-round option for the quarterback. That's the added value with that as well.
Gotcha.
So Chris, let me ask you this. We didn't touch on this. If the 3 quarterbacks are taken early, and presumably they're one of the targets for the Giants, would Shane trade back from 6?
I don't think he'd be opposed to it. Okay. The question I have, though, is what are you going to get? Because if those 3 quarterbacks are off the board, and if the teams feel like, at least most people feel at this point, that there's probably not another quarterback worth taking in the top 8 to 10 picks, what team is going to trade up to 6 where you're going to get a future first-round pick? And if you're not getting a future first-round pick, I don't think it's worth trading down. Like if you view a Malik Neighbors as a elite game-changing wide receiver prospect, and or the other option is you trade down to 9 and you get a future second-round pick, we'll say, I'd rather just take Neighbors. I don't mess around with that pick. Now, if you could trade back, you get a future first, that's different. But if you can't get that, I'd rather just stay at 6 and take the best player on my board.
Yeah, I agree. I'm totally with you on that. So, all right, let me ask this. I know we talked about a pre-show, but what are some rumblings in the building, Chris, as to what the Giants might want to do here? Like, what is the internal take? Are they so in love with? I mean, we're talking, how we feel about these things, but how are the Giants feeling to the best of your knowledge, if you're willing to share, if you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not. I obviously work with Patricia Traina. She tells me things every now and again. Last year, I thought it was going to happen anyway, and then she cemented it when we talked about Daniel Jones. I knew we were signing Daniel Jones. I'm going to have a show with her tomorrow, actually, so she'll probably give me the little sprinkles of what she's heard. She always tells me when it comes to draft rumors that she hears, it picks up at the combine. That's when you start to get a better grasp of potential trades. So that's where I think I'm going to get a better grasp. But what I will say, I won't say the name, the Giants are not in love with, at least from what she's told me. And I trust her. I think she does have reliable sources in that building. She's been working for the Giants for, 20 years, whatever it's been. They don't love one of the consensus top 2 quarterbacks in this class.
Okay. Then we'll walk away with that. I mean, Giants fans, you can go from there and take a guess. I mean, obviously, it's kind of cut down the quarterbacks here, but let me just say,
I have a part 2, Chris. I mean, Spartan,
yeah,
right?
He said it. He said it's down to the top 2, and the only piece I'm going to say is I'm not surprised. But anyway, that's all. I'm just going to leave it at. So, look, I mean, Chris, thank you so much for hopping on the show tonight. Truth, you got any more questions for Chris before we have him?
No. Again, thank you for coming on, man. And I always enjoy your takes. Always. You make a lot of sense when you talk. So
yeah.
Yeah, no, listen, I always love coming on. In the end, if you ask me what I think we're going to do, a lot of Giants fans in the chat aren't going to want to hear this. This isn't with me having any sources. It's just what I think is going to happen. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. But just the makeup of this team, where we're picking in the draft, I don't think we're taking a quarterback. And I don't think we're taking a quarterback day 2 either. I think right now, if I had to guess, the Giants route that they take is they go wide receiver at 6, because I would sprinkle in tackle as a possibility there if I didn't hear the things that Shane said. I believe Shane when he talks. He's not going to tell you exactly what he's going to do, but you could read between the lines with Shane. He's pretty straightforward, especially last offseason when he talked about Barkley and Jones and the way they were going to handle the contract negotiations, when he talked about how they weren't considering a quarterback for the most part in his first year here, when people were saying, Willis this, Willis that. He's been pretty straightforward. And if you read between the tea leaves, Shane has really backed the idea of sticking with Evan Neal at the right tackle. So it's kind of why I don't view Joe Alt as a possibility. And because of what we talked about earlier, I don't think I'm leaning they would trade down because I don't think the value is going to be there if all the top 3 quarterbacks are off the board. I think we're going to say it's 6. I think we're going to get a weapon. I think it's going to be a Malik Neighbors, a Roma Dunze, maybe a Brock Bowers, but that's the route I think we go. We're going to have a much better idea after free agency when we see how they spend these dollars and start to shape their team. If they spend $20 million on T. Higgins, different story. I'll have a different opinion. But right now, that's how I feel. I think we're going to go for that top weapon with the 6th pick. And then day 2, you go BPA, but I certainly think an offensive guard will be one of those 2 picks, at least as of now, before I see what they do in free agency. I could certainly see a day 3 quarterback, but I think we're going to sign a very good backup, a guy like a Gardner Minshew, a guy like a Ryan Tannehill. That's where I'm at, because the Giants look at Jones. They say we're financially obligated to this guy. He's going to be on this team anyway next year. If we're being completely fair, he only played 5 games last year, or 6, but he got hurt in the middle of it. He played some great defenses. Andrew Thomas missed basically every snap. I'm just talking from the mind of Joe Shane and how the way I think he's going to think. And he's going to say, we're going to give him another year. We're going to get a really good backup, not knowing whether or not he could start the year. And if Jones struggles first 4 or 5 weeks, I could see him quickly getting replaced by a guy like a Minshew or a strong backup that we bring in. But I think the Giants are going to use one more year to continue to build this team. And I think that was the initial plan when they signed Jones to the deal that they did. They didn't completely buy into Daniel Jones. They said, we're going to give him 2 years and see how we build this team along the way, and then come to the decision of whether or not we truly feel he's the long-term quarterback. And I don't think they will come to that decision, but I think you're going to get one more year of Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. An expensive optional bridge pretty much 2 years, right? After this year, I mean, they're pretty much done with Jones. So be it. One last question is this, though. Will you be at the draft? Are you going to Detroit?
No, I wish I was. That'd be a lot of fun. No, unfortunately, I will be live streaming it on YouTube like I do most years. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. What about? Well, you're from that area, right?
Well, I went to school out there. I live in Chicago now, but I grew up out east though. But I'm going to go because I got buddies in the area. So I mean the hotels are going for like $1,000. So
that should be fun, man.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's gonna be cold.
It's gonna be crisp. It's gonna be a crisp one, no doubt about it. But I can't wait. I've never been there live. Obviously, they don't do it in New York anymore, so I mean, I can't wait to go.
Yeah, man, I had a blast though, man. Thank you guys so much for having me on, and we'll talk about. I'm sure I'll pop on again whenever you guys ask. I always love to talk Giants with everybody.
We appreciate that. We might want to bring you back, and we'll stay connected. Thank you so much, Dana. And,
thank you, Chris.
And Truth, as always, great show. Take care, guys. Giants fans, thanks all for tuning in, man. We appreciate you all. Peace.